and welcome to the first episode of The Furnace Remnant. Now, some of you may be asking, first episode? You've done like 9 already. Now, let me get into that. The original purpose for this podcast was to talk about certain subjects in the Bible that, at least for me, have, some questions have arisen. And I'm going to get into more detail about that. Let me give you a little backstory as to why all of a sudden I'm having this revamp of the podcast. Originally, this was the intention for the show, touching on such subjects as cannabis use, immigration, slavery, and other subjects of the sort. And I really felt like I was unworthy of the task. I felt like I was not equipped to do this. And so I decided I was going to take the creative fiction route and call it obedience, which it wasn't. And there arose some other issues. I thought about the fact that in narrating short stories that I was going to have problems because of my accent or the fact that I have a tendency to mumble when I talk. But one thing that I have wanted to do with a podcast ever since I wanted to start this out is give a sense of conversation between the listener and I. And I understand that this is monologue, but I didn't want the sense of talking at you with this. Sometimes, given what I'm talking about, maybe there'll be times where it feels like I'm talking to you, but never at you. But my main goal is to feel like I'm talking with you. Again, given that this is monologue, I'm doing the best that I can with this. And with that being said, I was so worried about that again in narrating the short stories that I was doing that I relied on AI narration. And I didn't feel right about that either. So what I've decided to do is revamp the show, going with its original intention and being obedient to what God has called me to do, and set up a Patreon to where I can put the short stories back in with me narrating them. And I understand I'm probably going to slip up sometimes in narrating them, but that's part of the human experience. We talk to people every day, and that is the experience of it. We slip up in our words or whatnot. And I get it. It's not going to be presented as professional as if I were to take out the edits and, edit out, the mistakes that I make. And another thing that I'm going to be doing is using the Riverside app, which I have avoided for so long. And so I don't know exactly what it's going to correct of mine. This is my maiden journey with Riverside, this episode right here. So with the Patreon thing, I don't know exactly what I'm going to do as far as tier system. I've always kind of had a problem with charging people. One thing that I will say, though, is with this stuff that's focused on the word, I will never put a price on it. I will never differentiate between people who can afford or want to pay for exclusive content and those that can't or simply won't. I'm not going to put a price on the word, as I said. So I'm still deciding how I'm going to do this other content. Feel free to let me know how you or what you feel about that. It's my understanding that there is a free tier here on Patreon that I can put the exclusive short stories on. There's a couple of other ideas I may have as far as exclusive content, and I'm really honestly undecided on if I want to have a monthly charge for that. It's not going to be much, I'll tell you that much, if I do decide to do that. So to get back into this journey, in this first episode, I had these articles that I had written out, these subjects that I wanted to talk about. And what I ended up doing is creating a Substack page where I posted them as articles. And again, I called it obedience, which it wasn't. I've been wrestling with God for months and months about this. And it always goes back to the same thing, that I need to be doing this in podcast form, these articles in podcast form, even if I'm just reading them out to you, which I think would be the best thing, is that I work on them and that I read them when I'm done with them. As far as a schedule as to the release of episodes, I'm not sure how that's going to work yet, which is kind of hard for me to say. I'm a very structured person, but maybe this is part of the growth for me that God has intended, is to work outside of, the constraints of structure. And honestly, the reading and the writing and the studying that I'm needing to do for these articles takes some time. I don't want to rush through any of these. And I feel like if I have this structure where I'm going to release a new episode every week, every couple of weeks, whatever, it's going to make me feel rushed and it's going to diminish the quality of the episodes. And I do not want to do that. So bear with me on this, and I hope that you embark on this journey with me. And what I'm going to do in this first episode is I'm going to read that first article that I wrote and put on Substack, because it really sums up a lot of this. So I'm going to get into that right now. Still reading, an ongoing engagement with Scripture. I have been reading the Bible for over 30 years. Not continuously, not always well, and not always with the same assumptions. What has remained consistent is this: the text has never exhausted itself. Each return reveals something newly noticed, newly questioned, or newly unsettled. Over time, Scripture has proven less like a static object to be mastered and more like a body of literature that resists final capture. Stories I once read as simple moral instruction now appear layered with ambiguity. Laws I once dismissed as distant or obsolete now raise ethical and theological questions I had not previously considered. Passages I thought I understood have, with age and experience, demanded rereading rather than reaffirmation. This podcast exists because of that tension. The Bible is often approached either devotionally, where questions are discouraged in favor of certainty, or academically, where belief is bracketed entirely. My engagement falls somewhere between. I read Scripture as a text rooted in history, shaped by culture, language, and power, yet one that continues to speak into questions of faith, justice, mercy, and human responsibility. I am not a professional biblical scholar. I do not claim expertise, authority, or interpretive finality. What I do bring is long familiarity, sustained attention, and a willingness to revise conclusions when the text, context, or lived experience demands it. My reflections are provisional by design, part of an ongoing interpretive process rather than a settled system. Much of what I share here will involve slowing down, reading closely, paying attention to what is often skipped, harmonized too quickly, or explained away. At times, this will mean rediscovering ideas I once thought I had outgrown. Other times, it will mean acknowledging that what I once knew was incomplete or shaped by assumptions I no longer hold. This podcast is not an argument for certainty. It is an invitation to study, to think, and to remain open. Scripture has endured precisely because it withstands rereading. My aim here is not to resolve that endurance, but to engage it honestly. If you are interested in Scripture as a serious text, one that rewards patience, humility, and sustained inquiry, you are welcome to read along. And before I conclude, I do want to, give a quick apology to those who have subscribed to the podcast to listen to these short stories. Now, that's going to be, at least on this main part of the podcast, done away with. I hope that you maybe are interested in embarking on this journey with me as I study through the Bible and present it. And if you really want those short stories, now at least you will find them on Patreon, where they will be narrated by me as opposed to using AI. Again, I appreciate everybody who has subscribed. I appreciate everyone who has listened on their podcast platform of choice. And I'm still forming this podcast under this new revamping. So I ask for your continued patience and prayers as well. And with that, I am concluding this episode. My name is Andres, by the way, and I will see you on the next episode.